The emergency beacon pulsed weakly against the twilight sky, its red glow cutting through the dense fog that blanketed the valley. Commander Nera of the Kralaxian Defense Force struggled to stay conscious as her ship's remaining systems flickered and died around her. The once proud vessel, now little more than a twisted hull of quantum-forged metal, had carved a kilometre-long scar through the forest before coming to rest at the base of a mountain. Naira's silver-scaled skin gleamed dully in the emergency lights as she assessed her injuries. A deep gash ran along her side, and her right arm hung useless, the complex arrangement of tendons and enhanced muscle tissue torn during the crash. The battle that had brought her here played through her mind in fragments. The ambush, the desperate flight through uncharted space, and finally the devastating hit that had sent her spiraling toward this unknown world. The ship's atmospheric analyzer had confirmed breathable air before failing completely, so Nera forced open the damaged cockpit with her good arm. The cold air that rushed in carried unfamiliar scents, organic, rich, wild. She had never encountered a world quite like this one, and her training hadn't prepared her for crash landing on an uncharted planet. As she dragged herself from the wreckage, her enhanced vision captured movement in the tree line. Her warrior instincts screamed danger, but her body was too damaged to respond. The sound of approaching footsteps crunching through the underbrush grew louder, and Nera could only watch as a figure emerged from the mist. It was a human. Naira had only seen humans in intelligence briefings, a species that had recently begun expanding beyond their home system. This one was tall for their kind, wearing practical outdoor gear adapted for the harsh environment. He carried a medical kit and moved with the careful precision of someone trained to handle emergencies. "I'm Dr. Thomas Walker," he called out, keeping his distance but speaking clearly. "I'm here to help. Please don't try to move." Naira's universal translator managed to process his words, though the device was clearly damaged, adding a strange echo to the translation. She wanted to reach for her sidearm to maintain some control over the situation, but her body betrayed her. The pain and blood loss finally overwhelmed her enhanced physiology, and darkness crept into the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw was Thomas rushing forward to catch her as she collapsed, his expression showing no fear or disgust at her alien features, only determination and compassion. When Naira regained consciousness, she found herself in a small but well-equipped medical facility. The room was warm, and the bed had been modified to accommodate her larger frame and unique physiology. Medical monitors beeped steadily, their displays showing readings calibrated for Kralaxian biological norms, something that should have been impossible on this remote world. "You're at the New Providence Colony's medical center." Thomas's voice came from nearby. He was reviewing data on a holographic display, making adjustments to what appeared to be her treatment protocol. "I've treated your major injuries, but you'll need time to heal. Your ship's medical database was helpful in understanding your physiology." Naira tried to sit up, but found herself gently restrained by a medical field. "Why are you helping me?" she managed to ask, her translator working better now. Thomas turned to face her fully, his expression serious but kind. "Because you needed help. It's that simple." He paused, checking one of her monitors. "Though I admit, you're the first Kralaxian any of us have met in person. Your people tend to avoid contact with humans." This was true. The Kralaxian High Command viewed humans with suspicion, seeing them as unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Yet here was one, treating her wounds with expertise and respect. "The colony's leaders know you're here," Thomas continued, "but they've agreed to keep your presence quiet for now. We're not looking to create a diplomatic incident." He smiled slightly. though I imagine your presence here will raise quite a few questions on both sides." Nera studied him carefully. Her military training told her to be cautious, to reveal nothing, but something in Thomas's straightforward manner made her reconsider. "I was ambushed," she found herself saying. "My ship's data core contains information about a threat that could affect both our peoples." Thomas nodded, his expression growing more serious. "We can discuss that once you're stronger. For now, focus on healing." He adjusted something on her medical display. "And, Commander, welcome to Earth Colony New Providence. I think you'll find we're not quite what you expected." As Thomas left the room, Naira looked out the window at the alien landscape beyond. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors she had no names for. She had crashed on this world expecting to die alone. Instead, she had found something far more valuable than survival. She had found hope. Weeks passed in the New Providence colony, and Commander Nera found her preconceptions about humans crumbling day by day. The medical center had become both her sanctuary and her window into human society. From her room, she observed the constant flow of colonists going about their lives, farmers discussing crop rotations, miners comparing mineral samples, children playing in the community garden visible from her window. Thomas visited daily, not just to check her healing progress, but to answer her increasingly curious questions about human culture. Today, he found her attempting to stand despite her injuries, her silver scales catching the morning light. "Your regenerative capabilities are remarkable," he noted, reviewing her latest scans. "But you're still pushing yourself too hard." Nera flexed her newly healed arm, testing its strength. In Krylaxian society, warriors don't rest while threats loom. "The data in my ship's core." She paused, weighing her next words carefully. "The Nexari are moving again, Thomas. They're the ones who attacked me." Thomas's expression darkened. The Nexari were notorious throughout known space, a species that consumed other civilizations' technologies, leaving devastated worlds in their wake. "Tell me everything," he said, pulling up a chair. "They've developed a new form of quantum phase technology," Naira explained. "It allows them to bypass most defensive systems. I discovered one of their forward staging areas during my reconnaissance mission. That's why they shot me down. I saw too much." She met Thomas's gaze. "They're planning something big, and I believe both our peoples are targets." Before Thomas could respond, alarms blared throughout the colony. Colony Administrator Harrison's voice echoed through the facility. "Unidentified vessels approaching the outer system. All residents proceed to designated shelter areas." Thomas quickly accessed the colony's defense network through his neural interface. Multiple ships had appeared at the edge of the system, their energy signatures matching Krylaxian patterns. "Your people?" he asked Nera, though he already knew the answer. "A rescue team, most likely," she confirmed, her expression troubled. "But they won't understand. They'll see my presence here as a sign of human aggression. Our military protocol demands immediate extraction, with force if necessary." Thomas helped her to her feet. "Then we need to stop them before this turns into a diplomatic disaster. Can you walk?" Nera nodded, determination overriding her pain. "Help me to the communication array. I need to contact the fleet commander before they do something regrettable." As they made their way through the now empty corridors, Thomas noticed how the colonists they passed gave them curious but not fearful looks. In just a few weeks, Nera had become part of their community, despite her alien appearance. It gave him hope that their peoples could work together against the greater threat. They reached the colony's communications center, just as the Krylaxian ships entered orbit. The massive vessels cast shadows over the settlement, their weapons clearly primed. Harrison was already there, coordinating the colony's response. "Commander Nera," Harrison acknowledged with a nod. "I hope you can convince them we're not their enemies." Nera activated the communications array, her voice clear and commanding as she broadcast in her native language. The response was immediate. Fleet Commander Rixar, her former mentor, appeared on the main screen. "Commander Nera." Rixar's scaled face showed relief tinged with suspicion. "We feared the worst when your beacon went silent. Are you being held against your will?" "No, Fleet Commander," Naira responded firmly. "The humans of New Providence saved my life and protected me while I healed. More importantly, they helped preserve the intelligence I gathered about the Nexari threat." Rixar's expression shifted subtly. The mention of the Nexari clearly concerned him. "Explain." Over the next hour, Nera detailed her findings, with Thomas and Harrison providing supporting evidence from their own encounters with Nexari scout ships. The human colony's advanced sensor network had detected anomalies that, when combined with Naira's intelligence, painted a disturbing picture of the Nexari's plans. "They're not just building staging areas," Thomas explained, displaying the combined data. "They're creating a network of quantum phase corridors. If we're reading this correctly, they could strike multiple worlds simultaneously, human and Kralaxian." Rixar studied the evidence in silence. Finally, he spoke. "Commander Nera, your mission has revealed more than we anticipated. Perhaps—" He paused, centuries of Kralaxian isolation warring with tactical necessity. "Perhaps it is time for our peoples to share more than just space." Harrison stepped forward. "We're prepared to establish a formal communication channel between New Providence and your fleet, Commander Rixar, as a first step." As the leaders began discussing details, Thomas noticed Nera swaying slightly. Her injuries, though healing, still taxed her strength. He quietly helped her to a seat, earning a grateful look. "I never expected this outcome when I crashed here," she admitted softly. "My people have always prided ourselves on self-reliance, seeing cooperation as a form of weakness. But watching your colony, seeing how you all work together, support each other." She looked at Thomas. "Perhaps we have more to learn from humans than we realized." Thomas smiled. "And we have much to learn from you. But right now you need to rest. Let the diplomats handle the details." As they left the communications center, the Kralaxian ships still hovering protectively overhead, both knew that everything had changed. The bridge between their peoples had been built, not through grand diplomatic gestures, but through simple acts of compassion and trust. What they didn't know was that far away, in the darkness between stars, the Nexari were already moving. The true test of this newfound alliance was about to begin. The combined Human Kralaxian Defense Council gathered in New Providence's Central Command Center, where holographic displays showed the disturbing progress of Nexari expansion. 3 weeks had passed since the Kralaxian fleet's arrival, and the temporary alliance was being tested by both cultural clashes and mounting tension. Commander Nera stood before the assembled leaders, her newly healed body bearing scars that served as a constant reminder of how this alliance began. "The Nexari have accelerated their timeline," she reported, manipulating the holographic display to show a series of quantum phase corridor networks. "They've established 20 new staging points in the past week alone. Their pattern suggests they're creating a containment net." Thomas added, stepping forward to highlight specific nodes in the network. "Once it's complete, they could theoretically isolate entire sectors of space, cutting off any possibility of mutual aid between our peoples." Fleet Commander Rixar's scaled features tightened with concern. "The Kralaxian High Command remains. hesitant about full military cooperation with humans. They suggest we focus on defending our own territories. Administrator Harrison shook her head, her expression grim. That's exactly what the Nexari want, to keep us divided. We've analyzed their attack patterns over the last century. They've never failed to consume a civilization that tried to stand alone against them. The tension in the room was palpable. Decades of mutual distrust couldn't be erased in a few weeks, even with a common enemy looming. Naira felt the weight of both worlds pressing down on her shoulders. She had come to understand both perspectives. The proud isolation of her people and the collaborative spirit of humanity that had saved her life. A sudden alert cut through the debate. The room's displays shifted to show a massive energy surge at the edge of the system. Multiple quantum phase corridors were opening, their signature matching the Nexari patterns they had been studying. "They're here," Thomas announced, his hands flying over the control interface. 3 capital ships and at least a dozen support vessels. Their weapons are hot. Rixar immediately began issuing orders to his fleet, while Harrison activated the colony's defense protocols. But Naira's attention was drawn to an anomaly in the data. "Wait," she called out, enhancing a particular sensor reading. "These energy patterns, they're different from standard Nexari signatures. Thomas, compare them to the data from my crashed ship." Thomas quickly ran the analysis, his eyes widening at the results. "They're using your quantum drive signature, Commander. They've adapted their technology based on studying your crashed vessel." The realization hit Naira like a physical blow. "They let me escape," she whispered. "My crash wasn't an accident. They wanted me to reach an inhabited world so they could track the rescue response. We led them straight to this colony. The first Nexari strike came without warning. A quantum phase beam cut through the Kralaxian fleet's shields as if they weren't there, slicing one of the smaller vessels in half. The explosion lit up the colony's sky like a second sun. All ships, adjust shield frequencies." Rixar commanded, "Do not maintain static defensive positions." Harrison turned to Thomas. "Doctor, get to the medical center. We'll have casualties soon." She looked at Naira. "Commander, we need your tactical expertise here." But Naira was already moving toward the door. Thomas closed behind. "The medical center isn't the priority," she said firmly. "The Nexari aren't here to conquer this colony. They're here to harvest our combined technological knowledge. Their primary target will be the research facilities." "Where we've been storing the data from your ship," Thomas realized. "Along with everything we've learned about quantum phase technology while treating you." They raced through the corridors as the first impacts rocked the colony. Emergency barriers snapped into place, and colonists rushed to their designated shelter areas. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the space battle unfolding above. Kralaxian ships performing complex evasive maneuvers, while human vessels provided covering fire with their less advanced but more unpredictable weapon systems. "The research lab has a quantum-secured vault," Thomas explained as they ran. "If we can transfer all sensitive data there and initiate a purge of the main systems." Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. Emergency lights flickered, and the familiar hum of the colony's power grid took on an unstable note. "They're already inside the defensive perimeter," Naira observed grimly. "Thomas, you know the systems better than I do. Get to the lab and start the data transfer. I'll hold them off." Thomas grabbed her arm. "You're not fully healed. This isn't the time for heroics." Naira's silver scales shifted with determination. "This isn't heroics. This is strategy. The Nexari think they understand Kralaxian tactics because they studied my ship. But thanks to you humans, I've learned to be unpredictable. Before Thomas could argue further, the corridor behind them erupted in a shower of metal and composite materials. Through the breach stepped 3 Nexari warriors, their biomechanical bodies a disturbing fusion of organic and technological components. Their sensor arrays focused immediately on Nera and Thomas. "The data will be preserved," the lead Nexari announced in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own." Nera pushed Thomas toward the lab entrance. "Go. Complete the transfer." She shifted into a combat stance, her military training enhanced by what she had learned from watching human martial artists in the colony's training facilities. "I'll show them what happens when Kralaxian precision meets human adaptability." As Thomas reluctantly headed for the lab, the sounds of battle echoed through the corridor. The fate of 2 civilizations might depend on what happened in the next few minutes, but in that moment, all that mattered was protecting what they had built together, not just data and technology, but trust, understanding, and hope for a future where no species had to stand alone against the darkness. The Nexari advanced, their weapons charging, as Nera prepared to defend everything she had come to believe in. The research lab's emergency lights cast crimson shadows as Thomas raced through the data transfer protocols. Behind him, the sounds of Naira's battle with the Nexari warriors echoed through the corridors, a desperate symphony of energy weapons and hand-to-hand combat. His fingers flew across the holographic interface, initiating quantum encryption sequences. The combined knowledge of 2 civilizations flowed through secure channels into the vault's protected core. But it wasn't fast enough. The progress indicator seemed to mock him with its steady but slow advance. 67%. 68%. A massive impact shook the facility, and Thomas heard Nera cry out in pain. His instincts screamed at him to help her, but he forced himself to continue the transfer. "Trust her," he told himself. "She knows what she's doing." Through the lab's security feeds, he watched as Nera fought with a style he'd never seen before. Kralaxian martial arts blended with human boxing techniques she must have observed during her recovery. She had already disabled 1 Nexari warrior, its biomechanical body twitching on the floor, but 2 more pressed their attack. Transfer status. Naira shouted between exchanges, ducking under a quantum phase blade that left a molten slash in the wall behind her. 73%. Thomas called back. 3 minutes to completion. The lead Nexari warrior spoke again, its synthesized voice resonating through the metallic corridor. "Your resistance is inefficient. The data will be preserved. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will advance our evolution." "You know what's really inefficient?" Naira retorted, her silver scales gleaming with sweat and determination. Monologuing during a fight, she launched herself at the nearest Nexari, using a move Thomas recognized from the colony's zero-gravity training sessions. The warrior, programmed to expect traditional Kralaxian attacks, failed to compensate for the human-inspired technique. Naira's strike connected with its central processing node, sending cascading failures through its systems. But the victory cost her. The remaining Nexari caught her with a glancing blow, its energy field burning through her newly healed tissue. She stumbled, and Thomas saw death in the emotionless sensors of the advancing warrior. The data transfer reached 82%. Outside, the space battle had reached a fever pitch. The combined Kralaxian human fleet was holding its own, but at a terrible cost. Through the lab's reinforced windows, Thomas could see the burning hulks of ships from both sides lighting up the colony's night sky. Suddenly, his neural interface crackled with Administrator Harrison's voice. "Doctor, status report." "Still transferring." He responded, watching helplessly as Nera barely avoided another lethal strike. "But we have Nexari in the facility." "Hold position," Harrison ordered. "Fleet Commander Rixar has a plan, but we need 3 more minutes." Nera had backed toward the lab entrance, her injuries slowing her movements. The remaining Nexari warrior advanced methodically, its weapon systems charging for a killing blow. "Your hybrid tactics are interesting," it observed, "but ultimately futile. The Nexari cannot be stopped through mere adaptation." The data transfer reached 91%. Thomas made a decision. He initiated the final security protocols, locking them to his neural signature. Then he grabbed a plasma torch from the emergency equipment locker. "Naira," he called out, "remember what you said about human unpredictability?" She glanced back at him, understanding flooding her features. "Thomas, no, stay with the data." "The transfer will complete automatically," he said, hefting the torch. "Right now, you need a reminder that humans don't just teach, we fight." He rushed forward, plasma torch igniting with a fierce blue glow. The Nexari warrior, its systems optimized for combating Nera's hybrid style, took a crucial microsecond to recalculate its combat algorithms. That moment of confusion was all Thomas needed. He ducked under its guard and pressed the torch against its leg joint, where Nera's previous strikes had weakened its adaptive armor. The superheated plasma ate through the biomechanical components, and the warrior stumbled. Nera seized the opportunity, launching herself at the off-balance Nexari. Her claws found vital connection points, tearing through synthetic muscle and circuitry. The warrior fell, its systems failing. The data transfer reached 97%. Thomas. Harrison's voice cut through their moment of victory. Transfer status. 98%. He reported, already running back to the console. Almost there. Incoming. Naira shouted, her enhanced senses detecting something through the hull. The entire section of the colony shook as multiple quantum phase beams struck simultaneously. Warning klaxons blared as structural integrity began to fail. Through the windows, Thomas saw more Nexari ships dropping out of phase space, their weapons charging. "Transfer complete," Thomas announced, initiating the purge of the main systems. "Data is secured." Nera limped to his side, her injuries leaving a trail of silvery blood. "We need to move. This section won't hold much longer." But before they could reach the exit, a new sound cut through the chaos. A high-pitched whine that made their teeth ache and their vision blur. Through the windows, they watched in awe as dozens of quantum phase corridors opened around the colony. But these weren't Nexari signatures. "What did you do?" Thomas asked Harrison through his neural link. "Not us," Harrison replied, her voice filled with wonder. "Look." From the quantum corridors emerged ships unlike anything they'd seen before, sleek vessels that seemed to phase in and out of reality itself. Their weapons fired streams of pure quantum energy that cut through the Nexari ship's defenses like they weren't there. Fleet Commander Rixar's voice boomed through all channels. "The Ascended have heard our call for aid. The alliance of our peoples has drawn their attention. Stand fast." As the mysterious ships engaged the Nexari fleet, Thomas and Nera shared a look of amazement. Their desperate last stand had become something else entirely, the beginning of something much bigger than either of them had imagined. The war was far from over, but in that moment, watching advanced ships dance through quantum space to defend a fledgling alliance, they knew that everything had changed. Humanity and the Kralaxians had proved they could not only work together, but inspire others to join their cause. And somewhere in the chaos of battle, A single thought echoed through both their minds. This was only the beginning. 6 months after the Battle of New Providence, the colony had transformed. Where once stood simple prefabricated structures, now rose elegant buildings that blended human, Kralaxian, and ascended architectural styles. The research center, rebuilt with quantum-reinforced materials, had become a symbol of interspecies cooperation. Commander Nira stood at its highest observation deck, watching ships for a dozen different species move through the busy spacelands above. Her silver scales had healed, though they now bore intricate patterns, permanent reminders of the wounds that had led to this unprecedented alliance. "Still not used to the view?" Thomas asked, joining her at the window. He'd changed too, neural implants gifted by the Ascended glowing softly beneath his skin, allowing him to interface directly with quantum phase technology. "I keep thinking about that day I crashed here," Naira replied, her voice thoughtful. "I was so certain I would die alone on an alien world. Instead, she gestured at the bustling colony below, where humans and Kralaxians worked side by side, their differences forgotten in the pursuit of common goals. Instead, you helped change the galaxy," Thomas finished. "The Ascended were clear about that. They'd been watching both our species for centuries, waiting for a sign that we could move past our isolation and fear." A holographic alert materialized between them. Admiral Rixar requesting their presence in the quantum communication chamber. The former fleet commander's promotion had come after he'd helped establish the Coalition Defense Force, combining the strengths of all 3 civilizations. They found Rixar in discussion with Administrator Harrison and an Ascended representative, a being of pure energy contained within an crystalline environmental suit. The chamber's quantum-entangled displays showed real-time footage of Nexary space. "The offensive proceeds as planned," Rixar announced as they entered. "The Nexary didn't expect us to decrypt their phase corridor network so quickly. Their adaptive capabilities can't match our combined technologies. More importantly," Harrison added, "we've begun finding their harvest victims, civilizations we thought were lost. Some can be restored with Ascended healing technologies." The Ascended representative's voice resonated directly in their minds, a symphony of harmonious thoughts. "This coalition represents what we have long sought, proof that different species can not only coexist, but strengthen each other. The Nexary believed that consuming other civilizations was the path to evolution. They were wrong. True evolution comes from cooperation, from learning to see beyond surface differences to the potential within." Thomas stepped forward, examining the tactical displays. "The Nexary are falling back to their core systems. But that's not why you called us here, is it?" "No," Rixar confirmed. "We've detected unusual quantum signatures from unexplored space, possibly more civilizations in hiding, afraid of the Nexary. The Coalition Council wants to send an outreach mission. They've requested you both to lead it." Nera felt her scales ripple with surprise. "Us." The Ascended's crystalline form pulsed with gentle light. "Who better? Your story has spread throughout known space. The wounded warrior and the compassionate doctor who helped forge an alliance that changed the galaxy. You represent the best of both your peoples. And," Harrison added with a smile, "you've proven remarkably good at doing the impossible." Thomas turned to Nira, his expression questioning. They'd come so far from that crashed ship in the forest, from the desperate battle in the research lab. Each step had led them further into unknown territory, challenging everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. A chance to find more allies, Naira mused, her warriors' training now tempered by months of diplomatic experience. To show them they don't have to face the darkness alone. "Just like someone showed you," Thomas said softly. The ascended representative moved forward, its crystalline form refracting the room's light in complex patterns. There are more species out there, hiding in the shadows between stars. They need to know that unity is possible, that differences can become strengths. Will you show them? Naira looked at Thomas, seeing in his eyes the same mixture of excitement and purpose she felt. They had started as representatives of two isolated species, suspicious and wary of the unknown. Now they stood as proof that the greatest achievements come not from standing alone, but from reaching out to others. "When do we leave?" they asked in unison. As preparations began for their new mission, Naira paused at the observation window one last time. Below, New Providence continued to grow and change, each day bringing new discoveries and connections. Human children played with young Kralaxians in the parks, while ascended teachers shared ancient knowledge in floating quantum classrooms. "You know," Thomas said, joining her, "when I first found you in that crashed ship, I never imagined we'd end up here." Naira smiled, her scaled features softening. "That's the beauty of it, isn't it? We never know where compassion will lead us. We just have to be brave enough to take that first step." Outside, the stars beckoned, not as distant, cold points of light, but as bridges to new possibilities. Somewhere out there other civilizations waited, hoping for proof that they weren't alone in the universe. Nair and Thomas would find them, sharing their story not just as representatives of their own peoples, but as living proof that the greatest strength comes from reaching across the void to help others. The next chapter of their journey was about to begin, and this time they would face it together. The end.